Hollywood in the 1960s wasn't just swinging, it was exploding, melting down, and changing cinema forever. Forget the safe classics. Martin Scorsese's must-see list is packed with movies that broke rules, shattered nerves, and changed the way directors think. How many masterpieces have you missed just because nobody handed you the right list? Ready to see the 1960s through the eyes of the world's most passionate movie maniac? Buckle up, because these films will shake your expectations in ways you'll never forget. The Battle of Algiers. If you think you've seen a gritty war movie, think again. The Battle of Algiers doesn't just show you conflict, it throws you right into the streets, dust, and chaos of revolution. Scorsese has called this one a punch to the gut, and for good reason. Shot in a raw, newsreel style that makes every explosion feel like it's happening in your own city, this film isn't about grand speeches or heroic music. It's about ordinary people, desperate and dangerous, pushed to the edge by history. Director Gillo Pontecorvo didn't use big stars. Instead, he filled the screen with real faces and real fear, blurring the line between documentary and drama until you can't tell which is which. The French authorities actually banned the movie in some places because it hit too close to home. Even decades later, armies and activists study this film to learn about urban warfare, and Scorsese swears it's still one of the most essential films for understanding what real conflict looks like. But it's not just about history, it's about the messy, awful beauty of people fighting for something bigger than themselves, and the moral fallout that follows. The Battle of Algiers proves that cinema can still make your palms sweat, and that's exactly why Scorsese wants you to see it. One-Eyed Jacks, Marlon Brando. Genius or menace? In the story of One-Eyed Jacks, he was both. This was Brando's one and only time directing, and the legend is almost as wild as the film. The project chewed up big names like Sam Peckinpah and Stanley Kubrick before Brando finally took the reins, rewriting the script, firing people left and right, and running days and dollars over schedule. Most directors would have been buried by the chaos, but Brando created a fever dream of a Western that looks like no other. Scorsese didn't just admire One-Eyed Jacks from afar. He was so obsessed, he pushed for a full 4K restoration and personally brought it back to film festivals. Why? Because beneath the mayhem, Brando captured a strange fusion of old Hollywood romance and the raw, wounded energy that would define the coming decade. The landscapes are haunting, the betrayals cut deep, and Brando himself plays a character so unpredictable you can't take your eyes off him. It's a film about love gone sour and revenge so cold it might burn the desert down. Scorsese says this is what happens when you let chaos take the wheel, and sometimes that's exactly what a masterpiece needs. Chimes at midnight. When it comes to Orson Welles, everyone loves to shout about Citizen Kane, but ask Scorsese and you'll hear a different answer. Chimes at midnight. This is the film Welles himself was most proud of, and it's easy to see why. Taking Shakespeare's Henry plays and mashing them together, Welles turns the story into a rough, rowdy tale about friendship, betrayal, and fading glory. The battle scenes alone are legendary. Scorsese claims the climactic fight was so good, it rewrote the playbook for every director who came after. Braveheart, they studied this. Scorsese's own crews have pored over it, trying to figure out how Welles did it. The whole film is a playground of shadow and mud, with Welles himself towering as the doomed Falstaff, a lovable rogue whose time is slipping away. But Chimes at Midnight is more than spectacle. It's about loyalty that cuts both ways, the pain of aging out of your own legend, and the heartbreak of history marching on. For Scorsese, it's proof that the so-called end of a career can sometimes be the true beginning of greatness. Miss this film, and you're missing the real Orson Welles. The Haunting. You think horror is about monsters and blood? Think again. Scorsese put The Haunting at the top of his list of scariest movies, and he knows terror when he sees it. This is the movie that shows how fear works in the corners of your mind. No cheap jump scares, no fake skeletons jumping out of closets, just an old house, a handful of desperate people, and the slow, creeping sense that nothing will ever be the same. Director Robert Wise owed MGM one last film and decided to adapt Shirley Jackson's classic novel. The result is a masterpiece of suggestion, where the audience is left questioning what's real and what's not. The walls seem to breathe. Footsteps echo in empty halls, and a sense of dread settles in so thick you could cut it with a knife. Scorsese admires how The Haunting gets under your skin without showing you anything explicit. Even Stephen King and Steven Spielberg have sung its praises, but Scorsese goes a step further. He calls it absolutely terrifying, proof that real horror doesn't need to spill a drop of blood. If you want a masterclass in how to scare an audience with style, The Haunting is required viewing. The Innocents. If you want to know what makes a horror film truly great, listen to Scorsese talk about The Innocents. Based on Henry James's The Turn of the Screw, this film is all about psychological terror, not cheap tricks. From the very first scene, you're trapped in a beautiful country estate where something is deeply, disturbingly wrong. The children are just a little too quiet, the rooms are a little too cold, and the line between sanity and madness blurs with every frame. Director Jack Clayton crafts each shot like a painting, turning sunlight and shadow into weapons. Deborah Kerr gives a performance that will keep you guessing, is she haunted or is she losing her mind? Scorsese calls it one of his favorite horror films ever made, and it's easy to see why. Every moment is soaked in unease. Every smile could be a secret. But here's the genius. The Innocents never gives you easy answers. By the time the credits roll, you'll be second-guessing every ghost story you've ever heard. Scorsese loves how this film lingers in your mind, twisting the knife long after you've finished watching. This isn't just a scary movie. It's a lesson in how horror can be as beautiful as it is terrifying. L'Avventura. Want to see a movie that rewired the brains of filmmakers everywhere? L'Avventura is the one that launched 1,000 debates. When it premiered, audiences booed and critics didn't know what to make of it. But Scorsese, he calls it one of the great works of cinema. And if you want to understand why modern film feels the way it does, you owe this movie your attention. Director Michelangelo Antonioni flips the detective story upside down. A woman vanishes on a rocky island, and instead of a race to solve the mystery, the movie wanders into something far stranger. Relationships tangle and unravel, characters drift through alien landscapes, and the missing woman becomes less important than the emotional search inside everyone left behind. Scorsese admires how Antonioni turns the scenery into a character, using silence, distance, and awkward pauses to build a mood of longing and confusion. He says this isn't just a story about alienation, it's about spiritual distress, about what happens when people's signals to each other get scrambled and the world feels cold and unforgiving. Forget neat endings and tidy answers. L'Avventura wants you to live with the questions. If you're tired of movies that spoon-feed you every emotion, Scorsese insists you let this one break your brain a little. It's a movie that dares you to get lost. Contempt. If movies about marriages and meltdown make you uncomfortable, buckle up. Contempt is Godard's cinematic gut punch. Scorsese called it one of the most moving films of its era, and it's easy to see why. There's nothing safe or sweet here, just a painfully honest dissection of a relationship falling apart under the blinding lights of art, ambition, and betrayal. Jean-Luc Godard took his own crumbling marriage as fuel and created a film that slices deep. Brigitte Bardot and Michel Piccoli burned through the screen as a couple stuck in a sun-soaked nightmare, their love twisting and dying in real time. Every long take feels like an open wound. Every argument is poetry and poison. Scorsese admires the way Godard stretches scenes until they snap, using the camera to eavesdrop on the slow-motion collapse. There's a certain beauty in the way the film refuses easy answers or happy endings. Even Jack Palance as a Hollywood producer oozes menace, turning a movie about love into a thriller about pride and compromise. Contempt doesn't flinch, and neither does Scorsese. He says this is the movie to watch if you want to know how it feels when romance becomes a battleground, and art is the only thing left standing. It's harsh, gorgeous, and unforgettable. Psycho. So you think you know Psycho? Scorsese warns, watch it again. Everyone remembers the shower scene, but the real shock is how Alfred Hitchcock turns the audience into his personal plaything. When it dropped in 1960, this wasn't just another thriller. It was a cinematic grenade, changing forever how far you could push a mainstream audience. Hitchcock was a master manipulator. He shot on a tight budget, used his television crew, and kept the plot twist so secret, he bought up copies of the original novel. No one was allowed into the theater late, and the trailers dared you to guess what was coming. Today, the surprises are legendary, but Scorsese points out that the film's true power is its ability to disturb on every level, even when you know what's coming. Scorsese is still haunted by the atmosphere, the tension in every scene, the way the camera invades private spaces, the sound of the knife, the way Janet Leigh's fate rips the story in half. He says it's extremely disturbing and a great work of art, not just because of its shocks, but because it refuses to let the audience feel safe for even a second. Psycho isn't just a movie, it's a warning shot, and Scorsese wants you to feel every ripple of its impact, high and low. Leave it to Akira Kurosawa to turn a kidnapping into a moral earthquake. High and Low starts as a straightforward thriller. A businessman's child is snatched for ransom, but then flips the script when the kidnappers grab the chauffeur's kid by mistake. Now, the movie stares down the question, what is a life worth and who gets to decide? Scorsese has praised High and Low for its razor-sharp direction and staging. Every scene is blocked like a chess match, every movement calculated for maximum suspense. Kurosawa makes the city feel alive, full of class divides and tension, while Toshiro Mifune delivers a performance that crackles with anger, guilt, and impossible choices. Scorsese once tried to remake this story himself, which tells you how much he respects it. He calls it precise, modern, and full of energy. A movie that shows you not just the crime, but the fallout, the heartbreak, the ethics, the sheer mess of it all. High and Low isn't about easy justice or simple answers. It's about what happens when everyone is trapped, and there's no perfect way out. Scorsese wants you to see it because, like all great films, it forces you to look at your own heart and wonder what you'd do under the same pressure. Cape Fear. Some thrillers make you sweat. Cape Fear makes you feel hunted. Gregory Peck plays a small-town lawyer whose life is turned upside down by the relentless stalking of Robert Mitchum's ex-convict, just out of prison and hungry for payback. Scorsese didn't just admire this film, he held it in such high regard that he hesitated before remaking it himself decades later. The original Cape Fear was supposed to be a Hitchcock project, and you can feel the master's fingerprints all over the suspense and dread. Every frame pulses with danger. The phone rings, the footsteps echo, and the shadows on the wall seem to close in a little tighter. Mitchum's villain isn't just scary, he's hypnotic. The kind of monster who believes he's the hero. Scorsese points out how this film broke new ground for on-screen tension and violence. Critics called it tough and tight, full of disgust and regret, and they weren't wrong. Even the story behind the scenes is legendary. Storyboards from Hitchcock, passed to another director, then built into something uniquely disturbing. If you want to see where the psychological thriller found its teeth, Cape Fear is the blueprint. Scorsese calls it terrific. And after watching, you might start checking your locks a little more carefully. Play Dirty? Most war movies want you to root for the heroes. Play Dirty wants you to get your hands dirty. Scorsese loves this one for exactly that reason. It's mean, lean, and every character is out for themselves. Michael Caine leads a ragtag squad of British commandos posing as Italian soldiers, sent behind enemy lines to blow up a Nazi oil depot. Sounds like classic action, right? Except in this world, loyalty is for fools, and everyone's just trying to survive. From the opening scene, Caine driving with a corpse beside him while Italian march music plays, you know you're in for something twisted. The production itself was a powder keg. Richard Harris quit after a blowout, roles got reshuffled, and the movie just kept barreling forward. Director Andre de Toth doesn't waste time on sentiment. There are no rousing speeches or clean victories. Instead, you get betrayal, brutality, and a tone so sharp it could cut steel. Scorsese calls it not a sadistic film, but mean. He loves how the characters act without redeeming qualities, driven by sheer will. You won't walk away feeling good, but you'll walk away awake. Play Dirty is a shot of cold water, the kind of film that dares you to question what heroism even means. For Scorsese, it's a war movie with its teeth bared, and he wants you to feel every bite. Dark of the Sun. If you think 1960s movies were all polite and safe, Dark of the Sun will tear that illusion apart. This is the film Scorsese calls one of his guilty pleasures, and not because it's easy to watch. Imagine mercenaries in the Congo, a $50 million diamond heist, and a war zone where every side is as brutal as the last. By the time the credits roll, you'll feel like you survived something. The cast was a powder keg. Jim Brown hated making it. Kenneth More called it his most miserable film experience. And director Jack Cardiff just kept cranking up the violence and chaos. The result? Scorsese says it was the most violent movie he'd seen at that point. Whole armies clash, train cars explode, and there's not a drop of sentimentality to be found. Tarantino swiped pieces of the soundtrack for his own movies, but Scorsese wants you to notice something else, how the film's sheer brutality forces you to question the line between hero and villain. Critics were divided, audiences were shocked, and the movie barely survived its own bad reputation. But Scorsese says, you need to see it, if only to remember that cinema, at its wildest, can be an endurance test. Dark of the Sun isn't here to make you comfortable. It's here to see if you can handle the heat. The fall of the Roman Empire. Go big or go bankrupt. That's the legend behind the fall of the Roman Empire, a film so huge, it nearly took down the entire sword and sandal genre. Scorsese calls it the poignant beauty of a lost art. And he's not just talking about the marble columns and lavish costumes. This movie is the end of an era, a Hollywood epic with all the trimmings, but haunted by the knowledge that the good times couldn't last. The shoot was legendary. 143 days, sprawling locations in Rome and Madrid, action scenes that chewed through cast and crew. The budget ballooned up to $20 million, but the box office came up empty and the studio never recovered. Stephen Boyd blamed it for ruining his career. The producer went bankrupt, and critics wondered if this was the death of the Hollywood epic. But Scorsese insists you watch it, not just for the spectacle, but for the way director Anthony Mann pours every ounce of craft into the drama, the sense of space, the grand emotions, the doom hanging over every frame. This isn't just a movie, it's a monument. Watching the fall of the Roman Empire is like walking through the ruins of a vanished world. Scorsese says it's what happens when you chase greatness, even if it means losing everything. The trial. How do you film a nightmare? Orson Welles figured it out, and Scorsese wants you to see the result. The trial isn't just an adaptation of Kafka, it's a deep dive into a world where nothing makes sense and the walls are always closing in. Welles took the book's paranoia and ramped it up, with disorienting camera angles and strange sets that make you feel just as lost as the main character. Anthony Perkins, fresh off Psycho, stars as a man accused of a crime he can't understand, chased through endless corridors and shadowy rooms. For years, people thought this movie's original negative was lost, only for it to be rediscovered and restored, a little like the story itself, always slipping through your fingers. Scorsese calls the trial very disturbing and says one image, kids' eyes peeking through a wall, inspired shots in his own films. The critics didn't know what to do with it at first, but its reputation just kept growing. Ebert later called it a masterpiece, and modern directors have borrowed its tricks again and again. The trial isn't an easy watch. It's a challenge, a maze that dares you to find the exit. Scorsese wants you to get lost in it, to feel the confusion and the fear, and to see what happens when a filmmaker is given total freedom to follow his nightmares. The Train. Forget computer-generated spectacle. The Train delivers action the old-fashioned way. Real trains, real explosions, and a real sense of danger in every frame. Scorsese loves this one because it's all muscle and nerves, directed by John Frankenheimer at the height of his power. Set during World War II, it's about a French railway worker, played by Burt Lancaster, racing to stop Nazi officers from stealing priceless art as the Allies close in. What makes The Train so gripping is its refusal to glamorize the chase. Every close call is brutal, every fight feels desperate, and Lancaster throws himself, literally, into the stunts. The film's authenticity is off the charts. Real trains are crashed, real bridges are blown, and you can feel the grit in every scene. There's a constant tug-of-war between duty and survival, with moral lines blurring as the mission grows riskier. Scorsese points out that The Train is more than just suspense. It's a meditation on what's worth risking your life for and how quickly right and wrong can shift under pressure. The action is pulse-pounding, but the questions it asks stick with you long after the smoke clears. If you want to know how practical effects and real stakes make a difference, The Train is required viewing. Scorsese says it's a masterclass in tension, and he's not wrong. The Great Silence. If you think westerns are just dusty shootouts and white-hat heroes, The Great Silence is here to wreck your expectations. Sergio Corbucci's snowbound epic isn't just bleak, it's ice-cold, inside and out. Scorsese loves this film because it dares to flip every Western cliché on its head. Here, the good guys don't ride into the sunset, they ride into blizzards and heartbreak. The setup? A mute gunslinger, played with haunting restraint by Jean-Louis Trintignant, faces off against a sadistic bounty hunter in a frozen, lawless town. The silence isn't just in the hero's voice. It's in the empty, unforgiving landscape and the way hope gets swallowed by the snow. Corbucci's direction is ruthless. The violence is raw, the betrayals sting, and the ending is so daring, even seasoned moviegoers are left stunned. Scorsese admires how The Great Silence breaks all the rules. Instead of sun-baked deserts, you get blizzards. Instead of a rousing finish, you get a gut punch that lingers. Critics and audiences missed it at first, but over the years, its reputation has only grown, especially among directors who love stories that aren't afraid to be truly tragic. Scorsese wants you to watch The Great Silence for one reason. It's proof that even the Wild West can feel brand new. If you crave a Western with a real bite, this is the one that'll leave you reeling. Once Upon a Time in the West. Now for the ultimate widescreen showdown, Once Upon a Time in the West. For Scorsese and pretty much every director who ever picked up a camera, Sergio Leone's magnum opus is a Bible. This isn't just a Western, it's a myth written in dust and blood. Everything about it is huge, from the sweeping landscapes to Ennio Morricone's legendary score. Leone throws together a cast of giants, Henry Fonda playing against type as pure evil, Charles Bronson as a harmonica-wielding ghost, Claudia Cardinale as a survivor with more grit than anyone, and Jason Robards at his slippery best. The camera lingers on faces, tension builds like thunder, and when violence explodes, it feels earned. Every bullet, every betrayal. Scorsese raves about how Leone controls every frame, every moment. He calls it one of the best uses of widescreen ever, the film that showed a generation of filmmakers how to tell stories with images as much as words. The movie's sense of scale and tragedy sets the gold standard for epic filmmaking. Once Upon a Time in the West is cinema turned all the way up. Scorsese insists that if you care about movies, you can't afford to miss this. The final showdown alone will make you believe in the power of film all over again. So, what do you think? How many of these cinematic firecrackers have you actually seen? Scorsese's list isn't about comfort food. It's about movies that kick down the door, demand your attention, and rattle around in your head long after the credits roll. Which one are you putting on your watch list first? Drop your pick in the comments, smash that subscribe button, and share this with someone who thinks they know 60s cinema. The next masterpiece, you just might find it here.